I want to start with the big case last week. This $535 million. Like, from a public defender standpoint, what was the crime here? And I know I keep hearing this over and over on TV that he had a right to do it, right? And I got more hate mail about my comments on this case online than I have since I left the White House. People like, you keep sucking up to Donald Trump. And I'm like, take Donald Trump out for a second. Tell me who the victim is here. Tell me anyone else. There are people that have killed people, and the civil judgment is way less than this. So put your public defender hat back on for a second and just explain how this possibly could have happened.
Well, when you have a rigged two-tier system of justice, that's the only way it could happen. Because look, the one thing I learned as a public defender is everyone's entitled to due process, criminally and civilly. And beyond that, the one thing I learned that if there's going to be a fraud case, someone has to be defrauded. And if someone's not defrauded, then there is no fraud, i.e. in the Trump case, when they say the victim is quote unquote the state of New York and its banks, but the banks made money, that's the opposite of criminality. And so to me, it just shows that even the state civil
I don't mean to interrupt you, because here's, as a layperson, you laid it out exactly as I'm hearing. They're saying, I'm making this up just so everyone understands. So basically, it sounds to me like the case they're making is, hey, Trump, you only paid the bank 4% back, but you should have paid them back like 6%, and therefore they should have made more money. But still, it's the bank that's aggrieved. It's not like the state of New York would have gotten more money, or society at whole large, or some dude in Manhattan. The bank chose those terms to be acceptable, correct? So I still am missing. I get it. They could have, the court saying you should have paid more theoretically because those properties weren't what they were and your finances weren't what they were. Okay, fair enough. But in no case is the state of New York or anyone in New York aside from that bank or that lending institution the victim. And they were fine. They were like, hey, we got our 4% or whatever it was.
No, the banks came in, literally, it's like putting on the victims, quote unquote, of a crime and them coming in and them heaping praise on the person that supposedly committed a crime against them. The banks came in and said, we made tons of money and we did it on time. There was no debt deferral. There was no penalty fees. We got all of our principal plus interest back. The banks were like, we're really happy with this deal. And then New York State comes in and Letitia James and says, well, we're going to prosecute you anyway. And here's the arcane thing about it all. This prosecution in civil court was done without a jury of his peers. This judge came in and basically convicted Donald Trump before the case even started, just like Letitia James had convicted him during her campaign to be the attorney general. I think constitutionally, this thing's all getting reversed because you cannot deprive someone of the right to do business and fine them $250 million plus and just say, oh, it's up to a judge to decide because we use this one arcane statute.
Everyone I talk to says that they have lost faith in New York, right? That even if it had been a jury, there's no way that 12 people would have not convicted Donald Trump. So when you say, and I agree with you, I look at this and this is the case that I try to make to the Trump hater. Take Trump's name out of this for a second. Do you really think that this is a fair penalty against a non-victim crime, right? And they just stop and because I get the email saying, Sean, he's a total liar and a fraud his whole life. Well, okay, this wasn't like he was going up to St. Peter and having to account for his whole life. This was a criminal case or a civil case in New York City. So here's the question. Do you have faith in the system when you say that it'll be overturned, that it will be? Because I look and go, oh my God, like if this played out the way that it did, I don't know that I have faith, but I don't know enough about the system.
It's going to take time. Like, I definitely don't have faith in the New York state level trial system and maybe not even the appellates. Like, this is going to have to go through multiple levels of appeal, like everything else in Trump world. And ultimately we'll hopefully get to the right decision by somebody in federal court or the Supreme Court. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that's why this is the importance of the fight. This is why Donald Trump is the target, because he's fighting this case for every single other person that is either in support of him or in support of his policies in some way. And so he's the one they've chosen to pick on first. And he's the one that's sort of being the juggernaut of justice here. So it's going to take a little bit of a time for a course correction to occur. But I do believe by the time these cases all get to the appellate level, we've got Supreme Court cases, there's going to be this big intersection of justice, and people are just going to literally light their hair on fire and say, okay, enough's enough. We have to get back to a system of justice that works for this country. And it's like you said, take out Trump's name from not just this case, any of those cases, right? And it's not like, I mean, take it down to Georgia just for 1 second and say Kash Patel was a special prosecutor, not against Donald Trump, but Joe Biden. And Kash Patel then hires some lady to be his number 2 and starts sleeping with her, and they got going on love boat cruises together. I mean, what do you think the media would do to me?
The thing that's so funny, I'm glad you segued into that case, because I'm watching her, Fani, whatever her name is, Willis, her testimony. And I kept thinking to myself, this is like the idea that they brought race and everything into this, where people are like, so you just happen to have like $5,000 in cash. She's like, it's a black thing. And I'm like, if anyone else had said that, we'd be going, to your point, lighting our hair on fire. And yet it's over and over again. It's a black thing. Like, I cannot imagine that that's just entire, like people are paying like for a ton of stuff in cash, handing out the cash because they keep it. And yet everyone's reaction afterwards, to your point, was, wow, she was a strong witness. And I think one of the guys on CNN said, it's likely she ends up with a cable contract. And I'm like, yeah, with you guys. But it's just, I keep thinking in opposite world, this is Kash Patel was completely defiant and looked like a moron because he carries $4,000 in cash around.
Right. And I wouldn't get the minority card. Let me just tell you, as a brown man, they would not give me that sweet support of you are a minority, so you get to do whatever you want and create another system of justice. Also, by the way, when I was a prosecutor, I don't remember having $3,000 to $5,000 of spare change just at random available to me. So she's doing really well. I remember how much money I made when I was a public defender and prosecutor, and my mounting debt from law school. Maybe she's working on some other things outside of the legal courtroom. Or she's auditioning for these lucrative contracts that you're talking about on CNN. But to me, when you see the lead number 1 elected prosecutor in your county come into a courtroom and eviscerate the Constitution and then blame race, put this case aside for a second. I am a minority. I was a minority when I was a public defender, when I was in the Trump administration, and she set minorities back. She didn't help them. She's the one out there committing a crime, literally benefiting from the prosecution of a public person and going on trips and vacations with an individual she's sleeping with who she hid from the court, and they were together in the prosecution of Donald Trump. If I had ever done any one of those things, I'd be disbarred.
I don't want to go down a rabbit hole on this because there's a lot to get to, especially with you. But I do love the fact that she injected race over and over again, saying it's a black thing, right? Like that we all keep cash. But then she also, when asked about the dates of the relationship, said, you know how men are, and women, we do things different. And it was just so funny to see the progressive movement shut up. She's injecting race as her excuse for everything. Then she's injecting gender and talking about how women do things very different than men, and And yet all of these people on the left who complain to want a colorblind society and want gender pronouns that are interchangeable didn't say a word when she kept saying, oh, it's a female thing, or he believes this because men think like this. I just got a kick out of the fact that not one of these people on the far left objected to how she injected race and gender into everything that she said. But because it was in pursuit of getting Donald Trump, well, that's okay.
It doesn't matter. And it's okay to date someone who says the only thing black women should be doing is making me a sandwich. I mean, you literally can't make this stuff up. She said this in court on international TV and carried around like she was the victim. She's not the victim. The system of justice and Donald Trump, they're the victims. And I think what we saw is not only is this case need to be thrown out, but she gave Donald Trump more ammunition to showcase the 2-tier system of justice than maybe even Jack Smith has to this date.
So is the big issue in the Georgia case the fact that she was sleeping with this guy, Wade, and that they had a relationship? Or is it that he theoretically used the money that Fulton County was paying him to take her on trips, i.e. a kickback? Or is it both?
It's both. Look, as an officer of the court, when you bring a case, a prosecution, you have an obligation to disclose under the law to the judge any possible biases you might have. So if you are sleeping with the individual charged in bringing that prosecution, we're not here to judge that. You need to inform the court of it so the judge is aware and they can make the appropriate rulings. Putting that aside, That's one issue. The next issue for any other prosecutor is you are never allowed to receive, even collaterally, a monetary benefit. That is, no one on the prosecution can even be like, oh, thanks for that very nice dinner because I'm representing so-and-so or prosecute. It's illegal. It's literally illegal. And we're not talking about like a trip down to a Disney World in their own car. We're talking about flights, cruise ship voyages, friends, moms, parents. Everybody was in on this to the tune of thousands and thousands of dollars. All the while, this individual made $650,000. That's a lot of money, Sean, that was never disclosed. And that in and of itself should preclude her from being a prosecutor basically ever again.
So how this thing in your mind plays out that this judge, does he dismiss her? How does that case play out?
He'll probably sideline her, and then they'll have to bring in a whole, what we call taint team, like a whole conflict-free DA's office, essentially. So they'll have to farm this thing out to some other office, who knows where and who knows how long that's going to take. But the amount of appellate issues that have already been created for Donald Trump, I think the case should be dismissed, but I don't think the DA or the judge are going to go that far.
So they talked about, and this is the last thing I want to ask you about this because I was intrigued. They both claimed that the relationship started after she appointed him, right? And I'm not really sure if that matters, because to your point, they should have still notified the court. But this woman, Robin Yurti, testified that the relationship actually existed back in 2019. Does that matter?
Yes, it's critical. It doesn't matter in terms of what we're talking about, in terms of the rights that were violated against Donald Trump. What matters is the following. The judge conducted an evidentiary hearing. It was his call to do so. So now the judge has to make a credibility decision. Does he believe Fannie and Willis, or does he believe this new witness? And here's the thing, Sean, if he believes the witness, then Fannie, the DA, just lied under oath, which is a separate felony. So if the judge comes down on the side of the witness and says, I believe her and there's evidence to support that you were sleeping together in 2019, then you, the DA, will be held not only in contempt of court, but brought up on charges for perjuring yourself under oath, which is a whole nother crime. So it could be a whole nother set of issues for her.
There's this Alvin Bragg case in New York, which is to deal with these payments, this bookkeeping issue to Stormy Daniels that still blows my mind. I don't understand as a civilian how you can, I thought the statute of limitations were there for a reason, right? I mean, and I mean, like, that's the whole point. You always see, I love Law and Order. I watch all of them. And it's always like, damn it, we're just past the statute of limitations. We have to go after something else. But at least they'll make up a new charge. They'll be like, oh, he violated his parole. We can nab him on that. They literally went after Donald Trump on a bookkeeping charge that had passed the statute of limitations and then made it a felony. I don't understand that. To me, I look at that and go, how do you not walk into court and say, Your Honor, this is when I'm accused of doing X. Today is the date. Look at the calendar. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, look, you're right. It used to mean the rule of law used to actually stand for something when the statute of limitations. But beyond that, look at the case. Their key witness is a multiple convicted felon in Michael Cohen, who has made a living out of lying against his former boss, not to mention the fact that he probably broke attorney-client privilege when bringing this prosecution and assisting Alvin Bragg. So there's a whole slew of other issues that need to be raised on this case alone. But when you talk about fact witnesses, you're talking about two people that hate Donald Trump and are monetarily benefiting from that hatred, going on national TV and lying about President Trump. So, of course, Alvin Bragg is going to bring this case because it's going to make him, quote unquote, famous in the mainstream media. But when you look at the bias and the facts, Donald Trump should be exonerated in this case, too. But unfortunately, it's going to take another level of appeals, et cetera, to get down the road on that one.
Knowing all of the facts as we know them today, that case is supposed to start on March 25th.
Yeah.
How quick will that resolve itself?
Oh, no, this is what they want. They don't just want to convict Donald Court in the courts. They want to convict him in the court of public opinion, and they want him to sit in court during a presidential election year so he's off the campaign trail for 30, 60, 90 days. These state court cases take time. And I guarantee you, Alvin Bragg is going to drag this thing out for weeks, if not months, and force Donald Trump to sit in the seat instead of... Does he have
to sit in the seat? I know in a lot of these cases he's flown to New York, because he wants to be there. If Alvin Bragg is pursuing this case on March 25th, does he have to physically sit there? Is that part of the deal in that one?
Well, this is a criminal case. So it's very rare that a defendant is not mandated to sit there during a civil case. You can be excused and kind of come in and out and whatever. So I don't know the inner workings of New York state law on this specific crime. Maybe the judge gives him the permission to not be there, but I just don't think that's legally possible. And I think the AG and Alvin Bragg knows that. So he doesn't care whether he actually wins or loses the case. He's going to have a victory in his head if he keeps Donald Trump off the campaign trail for 60 days.
And how long? How do we see this case? Is this one of these cases that takes a week, a month? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, I think he's already publicly said, I think it's at least a month. You're talking 20 days of court work. That's a month, if not more. So, that takes you past Super Tuesday into April and into the rest of the primaries, and basically creeps right up against the Republican National Convention.
And is that a good thing for Trump or a bad thing?
Well, I think I think Donald Trump will figure out a way to use it as a benefit to explain to the world the two-tier system of justice. But I think it harms his ability to be on the campaign trail like he is right now and talk to Americans all across the country. Look, that's what Alvin Bragg, that's what Letitia James, that's what Jack Smith, that's what all of these prosecutors, Fannie Lou Willis want. They want to be the ones that took Donald Trump off the campaign trail.